Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Late Night Learning. I'm your host, Dr. Anthony Plomba. Now today we're going to be going through our second lecture here in the video games and gaming class. And we're going to be looking at decision making and influences and social well-being. And so in video gameplay, a lot of what we encounter is how do we make decisions? How do we feel as though we're making the right decision? Should I pick up that sword that's lying on the ground to defeat said monster? Do I know what I'm doing? Do I feel confident in what I'm doing? Is there any sense of loss aversion? This notion that I have to make this decision because I don't want to lose. That's the worst thing that I could do. And so because I don't want to lose that badly, maybe I play on an easier mode. Or maybe I'm mindful of picking up certain items that are really going to help me out the second time I face the boss in the particular level. And so, as video game players, we're always met with a multitude of different decisions we have to make. And we have to make kind of snap judgments really quickly. We have 1/10 of a second, 2/10 of a second, maybe a few seconds to make a decision before the game will respond with something that we may or may not care for. And so, when we think about video game decision making, there's a lot that is involved in it, and it's a very, very complex instrument based within the video game milieu, based within the video game environments that we play in. So let's get started. So why do we do what we do? That's kind of where I'd like to start this lecture. Why do we do what we do? First, when we think about video gameplay, we think about need versus want, right? And that's kind of with anything that we do in life. What do you need to do? What do you want to do? Need is something that is vital. I need to eat. I need to breathe. I need to collect hearts in the video game to make sure that I'm still alive, that my life bar is up. And want. What do you want to do? Do you want to do side missions? Do you want to do other things that may not be necessarily germane to you completing the level? We're also involved in self-regulation and involvement. And so we also determine how much involvement we may have in something. And so, for instance, when we're thinking about needs, important source of communication, involvement includes ads and products and purchase decisions. And involvement looks at the effectiveness to induce purchase, importance of the product class, perceived differences in product attributes. So what all of that means is that when we're looking to make a purchase, which is a decision, or if we're looking to pick up an item in a video game, or if we're at an auction in World of Warcraft or League of Legends and we're trying to auction off a piece of armor or buy a piece of armor, we have a lot of things to decide about whether or not we're involved in a particular situation and possible results of the involvement. We're also thinking about that, right? Do I really need to be in this cave for 15 minutes finding materia if I'm playing Final Fantasy VII? Do I really need to slaughter all these pigs in a field to get my experience points up? Do I really need to be bothered with this? And so with involvement and with self-regulation, we're constantly thinking about what is my being and status in the video game itself. Let's keep going. Product involvement. So if we're thinking about video game shopping, just taking a brief interlude from making decisions during video gameplay, during shopping, how many consumers experience product involvement with video games? We know that there are haptic experiences in video gameplay. We know that if we go to Target, if we go to Walmart, if we go to a pop-up Toys R Us, since the Toys R Us chain is no longer in service, we know that there are consoles there. And so we know that part of the video gameplay experience is testing a game, right? If you have the opportunity, you test the game at the video game store itself. And so we know at some marquee video game stores, such as the Nintendo store in Manhattan, on the second floor, you're able to test video games. You're able to play Nintendo games. Video game stores are structured like this because they want you to make decisions. Decision making doesn't just begin and end during video gameplay. It begins as well when we're in video game stores because there's a lot to pick from. And there's way more risk involved than watching a television show or watching a film. There is way more financial risk, perhaps psychological risk, social risk, other items to consider when investing in a video game. Remember, the average video game sells for about $60. So there's a lot of perceived risk here. That's the first thing I want you to think about when you're thinking about product involvement. Risk. We all face risk when we're making a video game decision, whether during video game play or whether during purchasing. So during video game play, how many perceived risk influence how consumers play video games? It all depends upon your threshold, your appetite for taking on risk. Do you like risk taking? Does it matter to you if you lose all of your coins or your items or your progress? Should it matter? It's up to the video game player. But product involvement involves the video game player making these crucial decisions. Let's keep going. Previous academic studies on decision making, so kind of going away from the store, but thinking in a macro sense a little bit, consumers tend to rely on as little information as possible when making a particular decision. This is absolutely true. This has been found in several marketing studies. This has been found time and time again that when consumers rely on cues or even heuristics to make some sort of decision or educated decision, they want as little information as possible. This is why when we go to a car dealership, we may hear a lot of different attributes being listed, but we really only agglomerate onto, if you will, or kind of latch onto a few of them. Nobody's going to be able to remember all 10 key attributes of the latest Honda CR-V. It's just not going to happen. Sometimes consumers are overtaken by an impulse to make several purchases while browsing a store. Has anybody here ever gone to a store and just started putting stuff in the cart, right? You go to the store, you're saying to yourself, I'm going to buy a bike. I just want a bicycle. But then before you know it, you're putting in the helmet, you're putting in, the pump for the wheels, right? To pump air into the tires. You're also buying a bicycle kit because why not, right? The first purchase is always the toughest thing. We see this phenomenon, especially at the end of a shopping spree. And so some of us might say, you know what? I went here to get milk at the store. I'm going to get gum. I'm going to get this. I'm going to get that. And then before you know it, you have a cart full of stuff that you did not intend to have. We see this phenomenon in video game play. We see people who make that first purchase in some sort of mobile video game, freemium game, in which it's free to play, and then they make one purchase. They make one purchase, and then they're kind of locked in, right? Well, I already sank $3 into this game. Maybe I can sink another $2, and then another $2, and then another $2. Before you know it, you're up to $20. Sometimes even thousands of dollars. Some video game players will invest in League of Legends and Fortnite and World of Warcraft and other games that are involved here. And so there is something to be said for some of us. Some of us have this proclivity, some of us less so, that once one thing is in the cart for some of us, we fill it up. We fill it up. And so if we're thinking about video game structures, a lot of video games today, if we think about how, digital weapon auctions go, and that you can buy things to enhance the level of gameplay, and you can buy progress, and you can buy a lot of other things, you can quickly see how some people kind of get sucked into this. That kind of that first purchase phenomenon, if you will, if we could brand it something. Or shopping momentum is another thing that it's been called. That sometimes some of us are susceptible to this shopping momentum, first purchase in which we just kind of go off and make more and more purchases. Let's keep going. Consumer immersion. So kind of steering away a bit from shopping, we also elect to immerse ourselves in gameplay. But why? Why do we make this decision to play as a female elf, to play as Master Chief, to play as LeBron James? None of us are these things, I suspect. Otherwise, somebody has a lot of explaining to do. We're none of these things. Nobody in the audience right now is any of these three things that I just mentioned. So why do we do it? Immersion is kind of the first step here. And usually video gameplay is attractive because it allows us to step outside of our own realities. We literally take a break, kind of de-stress from the reality that we have, the pressures that we face every day. Immersion allows us to submerge ourselves into a video game environment, hopefully one that is relatively unfamiliar to the one we live in. It involves the experience of being transported into another world. User expectations of the game or environment must match the video game environment. That means if we go into a forest or a jungle, there should be animals, right? There should be some sort of creature. We have that expectation. If we're in space, we imagine that we might jump a bit higher because of the lack of gravity in space. There are certain elements and physics that have to be addressed. The conventions of the world must also be consistent. So, for instance, in one town, if it's the case that everybody moves from left to right, that should be the case for another town, unless there's some sort of explanation for that. But the idea is that the conventions of the world should be relatively consistent here. Otherwise, video game players will be confused. They really won't know what's going on. They won't know what to think. As fantastical as the Final Fantasy series is, or Kingdom Hearts is for that matter, both excellent video game genres that I've had, or video game franchises that they're both excellent video game franchises that I've played. They both involve a lot of fantastical elements, but nevertheless, they stick with how the world should be. There are three types of transportation. One, the user arrives in another virtual world. Fine. So that might be like The Sims, right? It's kind of a simulated reality. It's not that much different. The user is transported to another place. Another place could be, Toe Jam and Earl. It could be, Super Mario Galaxy. It could be, any kind of games, any of those games. A user is transported alongside others to another place. What comes to mind is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Turtles in Time, in which you're with other Ninja Turtles, obviously, and you're being transported to other places. And so we can see this really with Red Dead Redemption as well. It's not necessary to have a world that replicates reality for immersion to occur here. That's important to understand. Red Dead Redemption is a game that does an excellent, phenomenal job of really immersing you within the world. Even though many of us have never ridden a horse or perhaps lived in the Wild West, we're still immersed. There are elements of realism there, the way the wind blows, the way the sunset is orchestrated, the way that the dust kicks up and rises. That's immersive. Because we ourselves, in our own reality, are immersed. We're fully immersed in our own reality, so long as we don't have a smartphone in front of us. But when we're walking, when we're talking, we are usually fully immersed in the world that we're in. And so if we think about being transported elsewhere, we have to have some sort of flow. There has to be some sort of flow. And there is a theory known as flow theory that states that we have to be fully immersed in something and then we lose track of time. We lose track of time because we're fully immersed and engaged in the particular phenomenon. And flow theory really does help explain a lot of different types of video game behavior and particularly consumer behavior as well. Let's keep going. Consumer engagement. So when we're thinking about a leaderboard, when we're thinking about being engaged here, much like this ferret fellow here, when we're looking to be engaged, there are a few things that video game screens will do for us. For one, we have diegetic elements, elements that can be seen in the virtual environment. We also have non-diegetic elements, elements that cannot be seen or not directly part of the story. So diegetic elements are elements that are in the virtual reality. We can see the pipe that we have to go through if we're Mario. We see the mountains and trees and forests that we have to go through. If we're in any kind of video game, even in Grand Theft Auto. In Grand Theft Auto, if you go outside the city limits, sometimes you can go through forests or you can drive through parks and stuff. Non-diegetic elements are elements that cannot be seen or are not directly part of the story. So this is, disembodied sound. You might hear sounds where, there's nothing that can be attributed to the sound on the screen. Cars honking, people screaming. You may not know all the time where that's coming from, especially in Grand Theft Auto. Additionally, in Grand Theft Auto, you have a scoreboard. You have the 5 stars that let you know if the cops or the military are coming after you. Points and scoreboards. Those elements are not really related to the particular world, but they still keep us focused. They still keep us immersed. Why? Because we are on a clock. We are on a calculation. We are on a quantified platform. So we have to keep going. In some sense, when you're playing a video game and you are immersed and you're fully aware and attentive to the non-diegetic elements, you may feel like a hamster kind of on a wheel that goes somewhere. Not that stays in the same place, but that goes somewhere. Because you constantly have to keep going because you're constantly being measured. Deep play in which stakes are high, points lost and gained, lives are on the line, ranking is on the line. So all of these elements are at play instantly. And so decision making is heightened here. That's the point of this slide. With consumer engagement, decision making is heightened and sped up. It's sped up because you're being tracked. Nobody is tracking you how well you watch How I Met Your Mother, how well you watch, Mix-ish or Blackish or Off the Boat or, This Is Us, any of the TV series that are currently going on right now. Nobody's watching how well you watch Stranger Things and how quickly you did it. Well, my buddy watched Stranger Things in 29 minutes. I did it in 25 minutes. That's literally impossible. Nobody does that. But with video gameplay, yeah. You're immersed in part because you're being monitored. Think about when you had to take the SATs. Sorry to bring that up. Think about when you have to take a test. You're being measured. I mean, you're obviously answering questions with answers, but you're being measured. And so you're fully immersed and engaged. So part of that engagement, part of the decision making comes from being immersed and being quantified all the time in gameplay. A player is accumulating layers of meaning that have strategic value here. What's my scoreboard say? How many days have I been here, right, in the digital world? How long has it taken me to accomplish this task? And how are other people doing? Will this unlock levels for me? Will this unlock special items for me? Am I screwing myself up from being here? Is this side mission really relevant? All of these questions have to be answered pretty quickly because you don't have a lot of time in games, generally speaking. Let's keep going. Presence. This is often applied to the 3D design games and virtual reality environments. It's not enough just to be transported to a world. You have to feel like you're there. You have to feel like you're in it. You have to feel as though you've left home. You've left where you've been. And you're somewhere else. With Google Cardboard, in particular, those of you who haven't used Google Cardboard, you can go to Venice. You can go skiing. It does an excellent job of fully immersing you so you feel present, so you feel there. It's one thing to be transported to the planet of Gabagoo. I'm just making something up here. But if we're on this planet, you don't feel like you're there. You feel like I'm here, but I don't feel like I'm here. That doesn't really do much for you, right? It's when your aunt and uncle send you postcards, big ones, lush ones of tropical places, wish you were here. We look at the back of the postcard, and if you almost feel like you're sucked in, if you almost feel as though you're there, that's achieving presence. Anybody can be immersed in a place, right? We can give anyone a pair of goggles or a headset. But if you don't feel like you're there, that extra level, well, then you're just immersed. But the goal here is to achieve presence. Let's keep going. Decision making, impacted by internal and external forces. This is my favorite slide in this lecture, in part because these are two of my studies. Very pleased to say both of these are published now. So one study that I did looked at active management of emotions. Consumers are absolutely active in their emotional management during video gameplay. This is an investigation that I did, and that they often seek out clarity and reflection, and they pursue. Can I restart this slide?
Yep.
I can see that I have a writing error here. Darn it. It's fine.
All right, so you just send me an updated slide.
Yeah. Decision making impacted by internal and external forces. Consumers who actively manage their emotions are inclined to seek out fantasy video games, while those who seek out clarity and reflection pursue information and reflection from storytelling. This is interesting. If I'm going to be managing my emotions, and this was a study that I had done, I might look out for fantasy. Fantasy, in some respects, helps us piece our lives back together after a tragedy or after something good. Fantasy doesn't exist, per se, but it does involve traits and elements and characteristics that are much indicative of the reality that we're used to, right? If we watch Star Wars, if we watch Star Trek, yes, it's another world. Yes, it's with creatures. Yes, it's with aliens. But love, hate, violence, jealousy, anger, and trust are still implicit in the storytelling. And so when we think about how we manage our emotions, fantasy allows us to kind of divest, jettison, abandon all trappings of reality, and instead look at core pieces of our experiences, which any alien, any creature, any world would likely have to deal with. If we're looking for clarity, if we're looking for reflection, maybe you've lost your job, maybe you've broken up with your girlfriend, maybe you've lost money. Clarity and reflection can also be gained from video gameplay. We might see what other characters go through. We might see what other characters struggle with. We might see the hardships other characters face and say, yeah, she gets it. He gets it. It gets it. And so we can learn a lot sometimes by not only watching other characters, but again, taking on their mantle, right? We put on a character's mantle. Any one of us can be Sonic. It's a weird thing to say. Can any one of us be Leonard or Sheldon from The Big Bang Theory? Doubtful. Many of us probably wouldn't want to be. But with video gameplay, we do take on these characters as ourselves, momentarily. There's an ethereal bond between us and characters. It's temporal. It doesn't exist for very long. Although there might be a conceptual bond, some sort of friendship or kinship there. But we take off that costume, if you will, that mantle of the character when we stop playing. But when we put on Mario, when we dress as Sonic, so to speak, or Master Chief, we kind of take a step away from ourselves and we kind of become somebody else or something else. Some sort of tertiary party, right? Some sort of third party. There's less risk in investigating our own emotions if we're Master Chief or Sonic or Mario or Cloud from Final Fantasy and we're just trying to get some sort of reflection going about who we are. And really deep storytelling, such as found in Final Fantasy in particular, and Kingdom Hearts for that matter, those two video game genres in particular. Storytelling is complex, it's deep, and we wind up feeling through the characters those same emotions that the characters likely feel. and it gives us a sense of what other people are going through, and it makes us more empathetic to other situations. And then it kind of falls back on us a little bit, and we begin to think about ourselves, maybe how we relate a little bit more to our own worlds after the video game console is off. Differently, kind of turning away from internal factors. External factors also play a role here. They certainly play a role here when we think about video game consumer behavior and decision making. We tend to play video games, during increased hours of daylight, temperature, and weather. Of course, this varies, though, from place to place. But for sure, the thing to draw here is that temperature, daylight, and weather do impact how we play video games. In my study, I had a convenience sample of 33 Nintendo Wiis, and I found that temperature, daylight, and weather, when temperature was high, when increased hours of daylight and good weather was going, people were more inclined to play video games, which might be depressing for some of you to know. But again, this was not a randomized sample, it was a convenience sample, so you really can't generalize from the study. But it does offer a window into that temperature, daylight, and weather absolutely can impact how we play video games and what propels us to play video games. Let's keep going. Scarcity. When there are only 10 pairs of Jordans that are going to be released for a week or in a limited time, we all have a friend, a sneakerhead if you will, who will go out of his skin or her skin to get that pair of Jordans. Good God, if they don't get that pair of Jordans, we need to leave the state because they're going to implode, they're going to go crazy, they're going to go wild. Scarcity is this notion of, when resources are scarce, how do we behave? How do we act? In video gameplay, this is very, very prominent. Items are only available for a certain time. Items appear and reappear and disappear, don't they? We also have bosses that might be in a certain area during video gameplay and then leave. Sometimes you have to track down the dragon you have to kill or the battleship you have to destroy. Things are not always stationary in video gameplay. And so there's a certain element of exclusivity here as well. It seems, as per this photo, you and I are the benefactors of seeing this gorgeous sunset. Scarce, right? I don't see anybody else here. You and I are enjoying this image. And so the level of exclusivity that scarcity offers is very attractive to people. We see this with a lot of luxury goods. We see it with Louis Vuitton. We see it with Armani Exchange. We see it with any of this, any luxury brand, Chanel, Mercedes-Benz. There's a level of exclusivity here. Sometimes it's not a lot of car models that have been made by Lamborghini, right? Another way to create exclusivity is price. How many people are willing to download a freemium game and pay $25 for a piece of armor? I mean, you can, and you would be in rarefied company, and it would separate you from the rest. So scarcity provides an opportunity for separation from others. Kill or be killed, right? Louis Vuitton or no Louis Vuitton. We all make decisions based around scarcity in gameplay. I need this item. There's only 10 of them in my world. If I'm playing online, it could very well be there are only 10 swords in this land among 1,000 video game players. Great. I'm going to be one of them to get it. And so consumers must first desire the scarce resource, but scarcity does something else. It makes items appear valuable. We don't want to miss out on having an item, or something else for that matter. Limited time, these sweaters are being put out by Express or Gap. Limited time for this, limited time for that. Limits and exclusivity propel a lot of consumption, even in gameplay. And so if we know on the second day of being with the Indian tribe in this video game, let's say, that I can get, a particular buffalo to kill, or I can get a particular weapon, or if I hang out with this tribe or that world or that town, that I can get this scarce resource that's really going to help me, it tends to motivate video game players to get it. The idea is that you will have an exclusive experience. And that's very thrilling to video game players, right? You kind of want to leave no stone unturned. You want to see everything in the video game. Some of us, at least. We do a thorough job of playing every possible permutation of the game itself. So when we think about all of these elements, you can quickly see that decision-making in video gameplay is very, very intricate. We know that scarcity plays a role in how we make decisions in video gameplay. We know diegetic and non-diegetic elements enhance the way in which we play games. If there's a scoreboard or a leaderboard or something as I'm playing, I'm going to play quicker. If we look at the game Sonic, for instance, your points and time and all of those things really propel you to play pretty quickly. These elements are incorporated to force video game players to make decisions. Well, that's all the time we have on Late Night Learning. As always, keep laughing and keep learning.